Welcome to T-Bone Speaks with Dr. Tarun Agarwal, where our goal is to change the way you practice dentistry by helping you achieve clinical, financial, and personal balance. Now, here's your host, T-Bone.
It's another Flashback episode where T-Bone was featured on the Thriving Dentist podcast. Enjoy.
Very excited to have a great friend of mine, long-standing friend of mine, from Raleigh, North Carolina. Hey, Tarun, how are you?
I'm good, Gary. How are you doing today?
I am doing fantastic. Tarun and I have been friends for many years online. Gosh, it feels like I've known you forever.
I can only keep friends online because the ones that see me personally on a physical basis typically can't stand me after a while.
Hey, I will politely take issue with that because I really love spending time with you. I remember the first time we met face to face. I think we had about a 4-hour dinner.
And, don't tell my wife.
Exactly. I think we had about a 4-hour dinner, and it was like I was visiting a long lost friend. And there was one common thread that connected us, and that was this wonderful profession of dentistry. Do you remember that meeting, Tarun?
I do. I remember I was out visiting Scottsdale, and I gave you a buzz, and I said, "Let's get together." It's been too many years, so. It was fun. I remember that evening very fondly.
Well, hey, we're continuing that today. And hey, I'm so excited to have you on the show. For those of you that don't know Tarun, let me take a minute. And by the way, you'd have to be living in a cave to not know who T-Bone is.
I've been fortunate to get out there a little bit.
Hey, you are the first guest I've had on the Thriving Dentist Show. This is the 170th show, but I know you'll find this hard to believe, but you are the first guest by the name of T-Bone I've had on the show.
Unbelievable. I thought that was a very common name here in America.
That's right. Hey, if in case you aren't familiar with Tarun, let me take a minute and give you a little bit of background. So, Tarun, would you do me a favor and listen to this bio and keep me honest?
Oh, God, I hate this part, but sure, I will do it.
Tarun Agarwal practices full-time in Raleigh, North Carolina. And one of the things I love about him is he is part of the new generation of dentists. He's a very young dentist, but at the same time, extremely accomplished. You've accomplished in a very short period of time what many dentists won't accomplish in their lifetime. But you're a respected speaker, author, opinion leader. You're really changing the way general dentists practice today. And what I like most about you is your common sense approach, your dedication to clinical excellence, and how you've been able to integrate technology along with just a down-to-earth personal demeanor. Hey, how's that for an introduction, Tarun? Did I do justice at all?
I don't think a PR firm could have written that any better.
But in all seriousness, Tarun, I love the way you bring a very practical approach to some very challenging topics. I've always considered it quite a skill to be able to take a complex subject and to simplify it down to its most basic. And you do that with technology. You do that in your courses. You do that in your lectures. It's one of the things I really like about Frank Spear. Frank is able to take a very complex topic and distill it down to its basic tenets and present it in a way that makes sense to everyone. And like Frank, you have that skill as well. So let me take my hat off to you, Tarun.
Thank you. Well, the only big difference between me and Frank is he actually knows what he's talking about.
Oh, yes, he does. And so do you. So, but I do want to emphasize you are, besides lecturing and teaching, you're a full-time practitioner there in Raleigh. Had a chance to meet your wonderful team. I was there lecturing in Raleigh back in January and had a chance to meet your wonderful team. And I took one look at your team and I instantly knew why you're so successful.
Yes, it's all about them.
We joke about that, but in all seriousness, your team absolutely stood out as passionate people who are very skilled, and you've done a great job of assembling a great team.
Yeah, I've been very lucky in that part of it. I don't know if it's luck or just dumb luck or if people are drawn to each other, but I would say that we owe all our success to the people around us.
I suspect that it's a combination of a lot of things, but I do suspect there's some power in attraction. I know that your practice has a reputation for being the practice to work for in the area, and you've been able to attract some really been able to attract and keep some very good team members.
Yeah, we've been lucky on that.
Yeah. Hey, if you don't mind, Tarun, can we dive right in?
Yeah, let's do it, man. Let's make this happen.
You bet. Hey, let's talk about a topic that's near and dear to my heart, which is how to thrive today in an insurance environment. I know you and I share many common philosophies about this. And, to refresh our listeners' memory on this, when Paul and I bought our practice in May of 2007, the previous dentist participated with many, many, many PPO plans. I believe we had 34 in place. Can you believe that, Tarun?
That is a boatload.
Exactly. I didn't know there were 34 PPO plans in Arizona. However, we quickly discovered that. And over time, we made some decisions that allowed us to reduce our insurance dependency. And today, we are a PPO provider of one insurance plan, and that's actually Delta Premier. Tarun, here in Arizona, you can be a Premier member and not be a PPO member. And currently, the only plan that we participate in is a Delta Premier member. So we've systematically eliminated the other 33, or we've resigned from the other 33.
Lucky for you. I wish I could get to that level.
Now, that's not to say that we're not insurance friendly. I like to think that we're very insurance friendly, Tarun. We're very happy to help our patients with their insurance benefits. We're happy to file the necessary paperwork. We're happy to go to bat for them when it comes to helping them gain their full coverage. However, in terms of the contractual obligations that we have, we're down to just Delta Premier, and we've done that in a very tough environment. Tarun, you come out to Arizona quite a bit.
Yeah, it's not easy. It's not easy at all.
It's competitive, and it's been hit very hard by the downturn in the economy. So, hey, let's talk a little bit about this. What do you think is necessary for dentists to thrive in an insurance environment today?
I always think that the first thing is acceptance. I mean, you have to mentally be committed to it. And what I mean by that, you can't have one foot in the door and you can't badmouth insurance and say all these things about it, but yet do it because you're not really committed to it or embracing it. And so that was the hardest thing for me in the beginning, was truly embracing it, that this is okay and it doesn't truly affect the way we treatment plan or the type of dentistry that we do or that we, provide to our patients. So acceptance was the first key. And then, from there, the next step was deciding that we will not let insurance dictate what we recommend to our patients. Now, certainly it plays a role in what patients choose to accept or how much they choose to accept. And that really comes into the other things that we're doing to make that better. And then, the most important thing that we've done is digital photography. Anytime that we can take a patient, and this is not about insurance practice, this is every practice, when you can take a patient and most people are skeptical by nature, and you can say to them, listen, let me show you what I see. Let's see together. And we can show them the pictures, and we can show them printed pictures. We can put on an iPad. We can put on a monitor. It really lets people understand better what's going on in the mouth. And then people start diagnosing themselves. And photography's made a tremendous difference. I mean, it's the most important thing that we've ever done in our practice. And we've got all kinds of technology. But I will always come back to photography as the most important thing. It's a thing I spend the most time on in our practice in the sense of drilling it into our team members of how important it is and making sure that we always have it. I mean, it is bar none the most important thing. And what I tell people on photography is don't get caught up in needing a fancy camera. And those are the ones that we use because we're very versed in it now. But just take something. Just start with something. And, when I talk to dentists, they always say, what photographs do you take? When do I take what? I say, it's just like when a patient comes in. When I say 4 bite wings, you know exactly what that means to you. So when I say photographic series to my teams, it means exactly something. And we take 6 photos on every patient that walks in the door. We take a full face. We take a smile. We take a retracted smile with the teeth slightly open so we see the edges of the teeth. We take an upper arch photograph. We take a lower arch photograph. And we take what I call the hygiene shot, which is the linguals of the lower anterior teeth. in a close-up manner.
I love it. Yeah, that's all. I'm going to add that last one to our series, Tarun. And hey, can we go back and talk about, you mentioned, you used the term acceptance.
Yes.
Can we go back to that for just a minute?
It's your show, man. I'll just go where you go.
Let's go back to that for just a minute. And I'm going to, the term that I would use the term acceptance, and I'm going to reframe that to commitment. So, in other words, to make this work, we've got to be committed to it. Are we using the same terminology there?
Yeah, I mean, we have the same meaning, absolutely.
Yeah. So, hey, this is where I wish we had a video format for this show. I've chosen audio because it's so easy for our listeners to consume. But I'm going to ask our listeners to just kind of draw a picture in your mind. Hey, Tarun, in Raleigh, North Carolina, around the first of the year, usually it's done January 1st, do they have polar bear swim events where crazy people go in ice cold water on January 1st to kind of kick off the new year? Do they do that in Raleigh, North Carolina?
Some people do that, yes. I call them idiots, but that's
there
okay.
we go. Well, I pretty much, they do that all over the world. And here's what I want to ask you, Tarun. Have you ever watched those events, like maybe on TV or it's on the evening news or whatever? I have. And you never notice someone, when it's, say, up in Buffalo, New York, and the temperature is, -10, and they've chiseled the ice away from the lake for these crazy people to go jump in. They never just like dip a toe in and then kind of slide in, do they?
No, they jump right in. And they don't just meander their way in. They jump.
I've never done this, but I think that's the only way to successfully do it. It's like you just have to be committed and go for it. And in the same way, I'd ask our listeners to kind of think about this when it comes to pretty much anything we talk about in the show today, whether it be our approach to insurance or our approach to technology. Jump right in, man. Don't just stick a toe in the water. Jump right in. But hey, let's go back to photography. So you take those 6 series and you call it your digital series, and your whole team knows what that means. Carry forward. What else do you do? What do you do with them once you've taken them?
Well, the first thing we always do is we enter them into our practice management software. In our office, we're using EagleSoft, but whether you're using Dentrix, SoftDent, it doesn't matter. You need to put them in some type of organization built into your patient chart. And then we'll print them, of course, and then we'll have some method of showing them to the patient, whether that's via a tablet or whether that's via a television screen. We have some way of showing them to the patient. And that's the key part, is taking the photographs isn't enough. You got to show me what good. I don't need the photograph. My patients need the photograph.
Jerome, can I share an amusing story with you?
Of course.
This is a long-standing client of mine. I'll leave him nameless so that I don't embarrass him, but I'll just leave him nameless. But this is a client of mine in the Chicago area. And this goes back about 3 years ago, Tarun. And I had introduced the idea of him taking digital photos on his patients, a series of 6 simple digital photos. And I showed him, the six photos to take. I recommended a very simple dental point and shoot camera, so it'd be very easy to do. And, recommended that he schedule a in-service training with his team during lunch one day where they'd practice taking pictures of each other. And so they'd learn, the assistants would learn how to take these photos. Anyway, about 2 months later, I visited his practice as a follow-up. And at dinner the night before, he said to me, Gary, I don't want to be, I don't mean to be a complainer, but, we've been taking those photos and it doesn't seem to be doing anything for our practice. I said, wow, really? Wow. I was kind of baffled. I said, wow, I just haven't never bumped in. And everyone else says, wow, they've made such a big difference in the practice. I said, Doctor, what does the patient say when you show them the photos? He goes, never mind. And I said, wait a minute. You've not been showing the photos to your patients? He goes, no, we haven't gotten to that part yet. I didn't fully understand the concept here.
No, wow.
So he was
Some people you have to spell it out for them, don't
apparently so. So, hey guys, I just for the listeners' benefit, we're talking about taking the photos and then actually showing them to the patients. What do you think, Tarun? Does that help us complete the project here a little bit?
Well, I would even take it one more step. I think you got to print them and give them to them as well.
Hey, there we go. By the way, of all the different methods of showing them, and there are many different ways we can show them. We can print them out and draw on them. You can put them up on a monitor, these days. We can put them on TV. We can put them on a notebook. I do like putting them on a notebook and leaving in the patient's lap and doing a trick that I learned from Frank, which is take the photos, put them on a tablet, put the tablet in the patient's lap, and make an excuse to leave the room. So Tarun, if you were my patient, I was the assistant, I might say, hey, Tarun, remember the pictures we took earlier in the appointment? I've loaded them here on this tablet. Here it is. And I'd hand them to you. And I'd give you a quick tutorial on how to look at the photos. Just, flick your finger if you want to see the next one and pinch your fingers outward if you want to zoom in. Here, go ahead and try. And then I'd make an excuse to leave the room. Tarun, I need to get some things ready for the next patient. While I'm out of the room, would you do me a favor and take a look at those photos? And when Doctor and I come back in the room, we'll be happy to spend as much time as you like answering any questions you have. I'll be right back. And leave the room. It's all theater. You don't have to leave the room. It's theatric. But what I learned from Frank is that when the patient is left alone with their photos, nearly everyone gets into those photos and they start zooming into infinity and they start seeing things in their mouth that they have never seen before. And it's a powerful, powerful exercise.
Well, it's the most important thing. The analogy I use is I like to use females as my analogy is how many women that go to buy makeup just buy the makeup without trying it on and looking in the mirror.
There you go.
And photographs are just looking in the mirror. And people don't naturally look in the mirror at their teeth the way we do. So we have to help them do that.
Yeah.
And people are stuck in the mentality, if it doesn't hurt, don't fix it. And, this is a way to let people know. And the vast majority of people do want to proactively take care of the things. They just don't know they need it done. And they just don't trust you enough. And photography gets past both of those issues.
Right. We hear two common reactions from the patient when we show them the photos. The first common reaction that we hear is, wow, I've never seen my teeth like this before. And the second comment that we usually hear right on the heels of that one is, oh, yuck, ooh. And they start showing us the things they don't like, which is perfect because now they are seeing their teeth in the way that we see their teeth. And, you're really doing a tremendous educational connection there, with the patient where they're starting to see the issues. That upper occlusal view, for example, or the lower occlusal view, where we're looking at the lower arch. I can't tell you how many times we have that conversation has led to adult braces, adult ortho, because the patient, wow, I didn't realize my teeth were that crooked. I didn't realize they were that crowded. And then when they look, it's like that helicopter shot looking down on the lower arch. All of a sudden they can see it. And it's like, wow, I never realized that.
It's interesting. As you speak of ortho, I think that's a great thing that helps people thrive in the insurance environment, because ortho typically isn't one of those insurance driven procedures. And, I always challenge people is if you can just add one ortho case per month to your practice, that's another $50,000, $60,000 in revenue to your practice. Great. And then if you just build from there, too often what I see with people is they want to become an ortho practice, or they want to really focus like that's all I do. I'm like, listen, just learn to crawl and just do one or two cases per month, and then worry about doing one a week or one every other week, and then one a week, and then before you know it, it's becoming a bigger part of your practice. And then along those lines with orthodontics, understand that there's more options than just clear aligners and traditional brackets. There are removable appliance therapy. There's the Inman aligner. There's different things that are more economical and affordable for your patients, and to make it easy for them to say yes.
Yeah, you're right. You raise a great point that one of the best ways to sort of insulate your practice from insurance is to provide services that aren't covered by insurance.
Yeah, provide people with things they want. I mean, listen, I firmly believe this. If you are a crown and bridge restorative only practice, you're going to die a slow death. I mean, it's just that's just the way our profession is moving. If you want to thrive and survive and do well, you're going to have to expand your services. And that's what we've done over the last 10 years is really worked on expanding our services and expanding the services within the services, the orthodontics being a great example.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of which, this gives us a nice chance to kind of transition to the next thing I wanted to talk about, which is technology. Tarun, I like to refer to you as a nerd, and yes. I'm using that as a term of endearment. I hope you accept it in the spirit in which it's delivered, because I am a fellow nerd.
Well, I am Brown from India. We are the tech support capital of the world.
Absolutely. But when I refer to you as a nerd, please understand that's a term of endearment. But you've embraced some very cool technology in your practice. Can you talk about a couple that you think are perhaps the most important technologies?
Well, three things come to mind. One is my digital camera, as we talked about earlier. That's always top of my list. Two will be our CAD CAM system. We use CEREC in our office to deliver what I consider what I call patient-centric visits to our patient. And then the third thing, which has probably had beyond the camera, the biggest impact in our practice has been our 3D imaging machine. That's really allowed us to really move forward in this digital implantology and diagnosis. And it's really, in the last 5 years, really shaped our practice quite differently than I expected in a very positive way.
Hey, so let's go back to the camera. I completely agree with what you said earlier about the fact that you don't need to have a sophisticated $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 camera. Like you, we have two types of cameras in our practice. Paul and Tim both have Canon I think they're D50s, D40s, yeah. D50s with ring flashes, and I think they weigh about 35 pounds. And the lens is about 2 feet long. I'm exaggerating, but not by much.
Not by much. No.
But let's face it. If a patient comes in for Paul and they're coming in and right from the very beginning they want a smile design, then Paul will take the full AACD series using the Canon D50. But that's not what we do on every new patient. That doesn't make sense. Would you agree, Tarun?
Oh, God.
We take a series of 6, and we have simple dental point-and-shoot cameras that weigh a matter of ounces. The assistants can hold them in one hand, and they take fantastic photos for this application.
Yeah, absolutely. They're great. I call those hygiene cameras.
There we go, hygiene cameras, yeah. And by the way, we can have multiple. We should have a camera in each op.
No, and that's if I would tell people, it's interesting. Like we're interviewing for various positions in our office, relatively constantly, because I always believe in looking for good people. Mm-hmm. But it's amazing how many people I interview and I ask about photographs, and they all say, "Well, we don't really take photographs, or only the doctor takes photographs, or we have this one camera that only he or she knows how to use." So I believe that every operatory should have its own dedicated camera. And I want to clarify one thing. When I say camera, I mean a camera. I don't mean an intraoral camera. I'm not a fan of intraoral cameras personally. I think they work well. I think they're good, but I don't think as you build your practice and move beyond single tooth dentistry, I don't think intraoral cameras are worthwhile experiences for people.
You raised such a great point there, Tarun, because if you want to do more single tooth dentistry, use an intraoral camera.
Yep.
We can. Tarun, you have a crack in your tooth. Let me show it to you. Boom. Yeah. As soon as we go into digital photography using a camera and showing arch forms, it opens up the conversation more from a tooth conversation to a smile conversation.
Yeah. And you can still zoom into that tooth.
You can zoom into infinity.
Yeah, you can zoom in without loss of clarity. In fact, I'd say it looks better than an intraoral camera. Mm-hmm. So you need to have one for every operatory. And then, the other thing I learned probably about 5 years ago, I would ask my hygienist, why don't we have a photograph on this patient? She says, well, I'm out of mirrors and retractors. And I said, well, that sucks. I mean, that's silly. So I said, how many do we need to get through a day? And they said, well, if we had 9 sets, we'd get through a day. So 2 days later, without
doing dishes, you'd have
absolutely, yeah. And that's the goal, because I don't want any excuses. So within a couple of days, we had 9 sets for each hygienist. So there's no reason. So I take away the excuses. Oh, the camera, so and so is using the camera, or you had the camera, or you had my memory card. No problem. Every operatory gets their own camera, their own memory card, their own reader, everything. And then every operatory gets enough mirrors and retractors to get you through an entire day.
Wow, great point. I mean, don't let a bottleneck be, inexpensive mirrors and retractors.
Yeah, I mean, they're $100 a set, if that.
Yeah.
If that.
Yeah. Hey, Tarun, when you mentioned that you're always interviewing for team members, that's interesting, because when I met your team out in Raleigh, they said they're always interviewing for a new doctor too.
Yeah, yes. It goes both ways. Absolutely. With me, it goes both ways. I get that.
Tongue firmly planted in cheek.
Yeah, no, that's okay. That's probably very true, actually.
Hey, let's talk about CEREC. Can I share an interesting bit of trivia?
I would love to.
So this is something I don't think I've ever shared with our listeners, but the year was 1986. 1986. And Dr. Omer Reed introduced the predecessor to the CEREC. It was a system that was being developed by Francois Duret, the French dentist. He was on a exchange program at USC. He was teaching at USC. This was the system that went on to become CEREC. And I was on stage with Dr. Reed in 1986 at the Chicago Midwinter Meeting, introducing what became CEREC, introducing CAD/CAM dentistry to the dental profession. Tarun, that room, we were in the ballroom at the Chicago Midwinter Meeting. I think it's at that particular meeting, I think it seated about 3,000 dentists. And that room sold out. And the Chicago Midwinter Meeting set up 2 other ballrooms in other parts of the meeting facility, and they televised in real time. They televised what we were doing on stage to these anterooms so that a couple thousand other dentists could see it. But that was actually 1986.
Wow.
How's that for an interesting bit of trivia?
Well, we are coming up on 30 years of CEREC, so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that was the computer that ran it, took, it was about the size of 3 refrigerators, if you can imagine that.
I can, yes.
Hey, so let's talk about CAD/CAM, and in particular about CEREC, and share your opinion about its application for our listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd like to start by saying, I'm biased towards CEREC, not financially, but clinically, and certainly as a speaker advocate. I do believe there are many good systems out there. So I encourage people to do something digital, but obviously, personally, I'd love for them to do CEREC. So I'm not against some of the other systems, as some people may be. But, for me, CEREC has been, it's slowly changed my practice. We've gone from doing inlay, onlay crowns with it. We don't do many inlays, but onlays and crowns with it, to doing some select anterior restorations with it. And really, in the last 3 or 4 years, it's really changed our digital implantology as it's gone down that road. So, what I tell people is CEREC isn't what you looked at 2 years ago or 3 years ago. Mm-hmm. It's not remotely the same as you looked at 2 or 3 years ago. And if you commit to it, and back to that commitment, mm-hmm. or, acceptance.
The polar bears swim.
Yes, if you commit to it, it will take you to places that you didn't dream were possible for your practice. And patients love it. Here's my challenge to everybody listening. If you ask every one of your patients that you're doing an indirect procedure on, if you ask every one of them, if I could get this done without any compromise in quality and get this done in a single visit, would you pay a little bit more for it, or would that interest you? My guess or bet would be 90% would say, yes, it interests them. And 50 to 75% of them would say that I'd even pay a little bit more mm-hmm. to have it done in a single visit.
Yeah, when you factor in the value of a person's time, and Tarun, I want to emphasize that does not assume that your patients have to be executives or professionals.
Probably more so that if they're not executives.
Exactly.
Executives make their own schedule.
Exactly. I'm talking about moms who their time is their greatest commodity, and if they could reduce it down, what used to be 2 visits to 1 visit, you have a raving fan there, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And what happens is, people hate the temporary, they hate coming back. And, what I tell everybody is, we always say, oh, it's just a 15, 20-minute appointment for the patient, but it's not really that. It's, they got to get a babysitter if they're a stay-at-home mom, or they got to ask their boss for another couple of hours off of work. They've got to get into the car and drive there and park. And then they got to get this work done, and they got to leave with a numb lip, depending on what you're doing. And then they got to go back to work and mentally get back into the mindset of going to work. Dentistry is disruptive to people's lives. I mean, from a work perspective. So anything you can do to make it easier for them. And quite honestly, I think it's better clinical dentistry. When you can bond and seal a tooth in a single visit, to me, that's better than putting a leaking temporary on the tooth for 2 or 3 weeks.
Right.
It's just better dentistry.
Tarun, that as part of my history that I taught for 8 years with Dr. David Hornbrook at at PAC Live up at University of Pacific. And we had 24 clinical instructors as part of our instructor faculty in that program. And where I started to get really excited about CEREC is when our instructors, now these are all dentists that would consider themselves to be aesthetic dentists.
The high-end dentists.
High-end dentists, they're either accredited by the AACD or very close to, they're working on becoming accredited by the AACD. They have a very fine-tuned set of eyes, very high standards. When I started to notice our instructors investing in CEREC, that's when I started to realize, wait a minute, the quality was there. Can you debunk an urban myth? In the urban myth that for the uninitiated, I hear when I'm lecturing, well, the quality just isn't there. Can you debunk that for just a minute?
Well, all I can do is tell you that it's, I don't get it. I mean, look, I take great personal. I hate it when somebody says that to me, because then what you're saying to me to my face is that I do bad dentistry.
You're compromising.
And listen, I work under either a 4X loop or a 10X microscope for most of my restorative work even. Mm-hmm. So, I would say that our margins are fantastic. Our fit is fantastic. Our contacts are fantastic. Our aesthetics are pretty nice, and it's what you make of it. I can make our aesthetics unbelievably fantastic if I want to spend a little bit more time doing it. Mm-hmm. And so, listen, we're beyond that. At this stage of the game, we're beyond. We should be beyond that.
I think the comments have to do with perhaps earlier generation.
Yeah, of course.
Perhaps someone, once saw a real early generation CAD CAM crown, and it just wasn't up to the same, aesthetic standards, wasn't up to the same anatomy. Plus, we have the advantage of materials today. There's some cool materials that are available.
Oh, absolutely. And, honestly, this is before my foray into CEREC is those used to be cemented in a sea of composite. I mean,
good point.
So if you look at CEREC restorations from more than, say, beyond 12 years ago, that technology was older. I mean, the marginal integrity wasn't there. We were taught to ultrasonic composite in to make them fit and to seal the margins with composite. So that technology that class of material has gone, and our technology has dramatically changed. I mean, listen, at the end of the day, what I tell people that say that CAD CAM doesn't work, I said, then you must not send any work to laboratories.
Good point.
Because laboratories are doing the same thing. They may have a different machine, and some of their machines may be, a little bit different or have different characteristics. But at the end of the day, it's CAD CAM. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's the same concept.
I know, Tarun, you have a business mind as well. Talk about the economics for just a minute of CEREC. Economically, there's a pretty strong case to be made for CEREC, correct?
Yeah, of course. I mean, if you think about it, number one, you don't take an impression. The average impression costs $20, $20 to $25 to take. Mm-hmm. And people argue with me on that. And then I say, listen, you have a tray. That tray costs $1. Mm-hmm. You have heavy body impression material that costs about $20 a tube. You have a tip that goes on it that costs about 75 cents. Then you have light body impression material that costs about $20 a tube. It has a tip on it. And then the tip of that has another tip. So each of those costs 75 cents. So by the time you add up all the costs, an impression costs you $20 to $25, and that's assuming you get it right the first time.
Right.
Then you have the cost of your provisional. And I ask everybody, how do you take your provisionals? How do you make them? And they'll say, well, we take a pre-op impression. So, okay, so you've got another tray with another set of impression materials. And then you have your provisional bisacryl, which comes out of a gun, which is $130 a tube. And it has a tip on it that costs about 75 cents as well. So, and then, what people rarely factor in is the cost of a second visit. Yeah. And that cost is, it's actually a significant cost, because you have to tear down a room, you have to reset up a room and tear it down again.
Well, Rella Christensen has reported that in terms of infection control costs, that it costs your office $25 to put a patient's butt in your chair.
At least.
And that's a conservative number.
Yeah, that's very conservative, because, because we have a team member that will call and confirm an appointment. Mm-hmm. You'll have somebody maybe that will call and change an appointment that takes another 10 minutes of your team member's time. So those things all add up. And then, the materials that we have to wrap, we wrap the whole office, for God's sakes, for a patient to come in. Yeah. And so those things aren't factored in.
And this is even before we got to the majority of the cost, which is, what you were paying a lab before versus what you're paying for a block of material. What's your block cost today? What
I tell everybody is, on average, my calculations have a restoration costing about $30 to $40 in material costs.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's a real world number.
Yeah, I mean, because you have your block, you have your resin cement, you have the burrs that wear and tear on your burrs, some lubricant that you use in your milling machine. So it works about $30-$35, somewhere in that ballpark per restoration that you fabricate.
So now you can, if you're listening to this, you can do your own math and figure out how many units a month you'd have to do to be ahead of the game with CEREC, not even counting, the other benefits of, the marketing benefits of single visit restorations or anything else.
I mean, a rough number that I tell everybody when I'm working with people or talking with people is it's about $150 savings per restoration. By the time you factor in your impression, your provisional, your lab fee, and all of that, and then you subtract out your cost of your disposable materials and using CEREC, in other words, the block and everything, it's about $150 per restoration.
Now, I'll ask you, I know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask this question because I get it all the time at courses. What about multiple units?
Of course, we can do multiple units with it. Just mill things. I mean, absolutely. Why would that be any different?
Exactly. But there's again a bit of an urban myth out there. Well, you can't use it for multiple units. That's not true.
It's actually probably more efficient to do multiple units. You can prep one while it's milling, prep the other one. By the time you're finished prepping that one, it's out of the machine. You cement it. The other one's finished milling. You cement that one. I mean, it's pretty straightforward.
Right. Right.
I mean, all these things typically come from people that have not looked at the technology with any seriousness in the last few years, right. Or these are the people that just want to naysay everything. I mean, they'll tell you that resins are bad and only amalgams work for patients.
I have heard that. I have heard that. And then you mentioned the third technology that you wouldn't want to practice without is CBCT.
Conebeam, 3D imaging. Oh God, we could go on for hours on that one. So for me, that has changed the game.
But now let's talk about some of the applications you found for it that maybe you didn't expect going in. Yeah. What were some things that sort of became enlightening to you as you started to play with the technology?
Well, I bought it simply to do implants. That's what I bought it for. What I call the side effect, and the analogy I always use is, you take medications and they're built for one thing and they find out the side effect is something else. And to me, the side effect of Conebeam was diagnostics. I mean, I didn't know much about it. I didn't care, to be honest with you, I didn't care much about it. But that's probably something we use more on probably every single patient that walks in is the 3D diagnostics and what we can see and what we can share with our patients that we weren't seeing before. Lesions on teeth, periapical infections, the number of canals in a molar, the airway, the size of the airway, whether it's collapsed or not collapsed, the sinus, are there things going on in their sinus? Just different things. When people come in and have pain, you can look at the TMJ joint. You can look at so many different things that honestly, I didn't even know existed.
Kind of makes you scratch your head about what were we doing before?
Well, 2D imaging has hit the end of the road of what it's capable of. I mean, we've really maxed it out and what it can do, the size of it, all of those things. I mean, even digital. I mean, we're pretty much at the point of what we can get out of 2D.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. This becomes a nice transition into dental implants.
Yeah.
And so I know you're passionate about helping your patients restore their health with dental implants, whether it be missing a single tooth or patients that are completely edentulous. Talk about your perspective of general dentists and implant dentistry.
Boy, I have to be careful not to say something inflammatory.
I can edit.
Here's what I believe. I believe that the implant process should be controlled by the general dentist. Okay. And why do I say that? Because very few patients come to any office saying, I want a full head of implants, or I need an implant. What they really want is a tooth. And that implant needs to be placed in a position that supports the tooth. Now, some general dentists will place the implant themselves and some won't. Mm-hmm. But to me, that process needs to be controlled by the general dentist. And
you're right. The patient doesn't want an implant. They want a tooth.
Very few people walk around with just an implant in their head. I mean, they really want a tooth there.
Yeah.
I mean, they could care less if you put the implant in upside down as long as they get the tooth. And another interesting fact is, and I quote Glidewell from this, Glidewell Dental Lab is, and in their laboratory, and they're good number to do this from because they're one of the world's largest labs, and a good cross section. Little over 90% of their implant restorations are one or two teeth.
I've had Dr. Michael DeTola on the show a couple times, and he's a great friend, and he's kind of let us peek inside the kimono at what they're doing out there at Glidewell. So I would absolutely trust their statistics for sure. That's interesting.
Yeah, 90%, a little over 90% are one or two teeth. Mm-hmm. And what that tells me is that's right in the wheelhouse of a general dentist. Now, do I think general dentists should be doing every implant? Of course not. What I set a target at, and we've exceeded this in our practice, but what I set a target for with most dentists that we work with is, listen, if you can do 50% of the implants that walk through your office, you're doing pretty damn good.
Okay.
So let's say that you need to do 50% of the implants. Now figure out what it takes to do that. Go along the way. And where I look at Conebeam is, it's the analogy is, it's like doing endo without ever looking at an X-ray. I mean, how many of us that do molar endo, the first thing we do is we decide, can I do this molar endo? We look at an X-ray. Mm-hmm. And we can't really do that in implantology with traditional X-rays, but we can with 3D imaging. You can measure, you can virtually plan. I can have my patient in the hygiene room, in the hygiene chair, and within a matter of 30 to 60 seconds, I can say, Mrs. Jones, you're a great candidate for an implant. Oh, Mrs. Jones, I'm going to need to do a bone graft. Mrs. Jones, listen, I'm going to send you to my specialist. This is not an implant you want me to do. Mm-hmm. And within 30 to 60 seconds, I can give them a definitive answer on what's possible.
When I was at PAC Live, Tarun, I was noticing, as I work with a lot of oral surgeons, I lecture every year at Amos and work with a lot of oral surgeons. And one of the things I noticed many years ago was that it didn't seem to me like the aesthetic dentists were talking much with the oral surgeons and the implantologists out there. And so I wanted to change that. So I invited Dr. Peter Scheer. Peter's a very prominent oral surgeon out of the Palm Desert area. He lectures internationally on dental implants. I invited Peter to come up to PAC Live and talk about dental implants, from the surgical perspective. And it was so cool because now all of a sudden we had cosmetic dentists talking to this world-renowned implant dentist. And it was cool for each one to understand the other's challenges, And so, Peter talked about what he needed in terms of strength and positioning. And then our aesthetic dentists would talk about what they needed in terms of aesthetics. And it created a wonderful collaboration that I think we're seeing more of that today. So I like what you said. You're not talking about having to do every implant that walks through the door.
You can't. I mean, you literally can't. I mean, they're a specialist for a reason. Okay, they're very good at what they do surgically. B, they're more trained than us at handling medically compromised patients. Yeah. I mean, I don't want to be sedating or doing work on a 90-year-old person. It's not my idea of fun.
Wait, that's not a fun day for you?
No, it's not. And so we pick and choose. We pick and choose. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And my specialists are okay with that.
Yeah,
I mean they're okay with that.
So you've got a great community of specialists there in the greater Raleigh area, and as do many of our listeners. But also many of our listeners are in places where they don't have access to specialists,
and that's even more reason for them to do it.
Exactly. Hey, Tarun, as we're kind of coming to the finish line here, can I put you on the spot for just a minute?
It scares me a little bit.
Well, we can always edit it if you give me the wrong answer. But hey, it occurs to me that one of the topics that I want to talk to you about is efficiency, business and clinical efficiency in the office. And we don't have time to do that in this interview. Could we get you back sometime to do another show on clinical and business efficiency?
You don't have to ask twice. Just tell me when.
Cool. Well, hey, before we part today, I've got one more question for you. And we didn't talk about this ahead of time, so I'll put you back on back in the hot seat. Is that all right?
I can deal with it.
So reflect back. We have a wide variety of listeners to the Thriving Dentist Show. We have dentists throughout the entire range in their career. But imagine you being a very young, freshly minted dentist. What would you tell a younger version of yourself about our profession?
Oh, I love our profession. It is, I decided I want to be a dentist when I was in 8th grade. So I absolutely love this profession. I went to a 6-year dental program straight out of high school. I graduated dental school when I was 23. I really love our profession. And, what I would tell other people is love it. I mean, it is anything you want it to be. I mean, that's what everybody about dentistry. It's my ability to be a quote unquote healer and work with people and be a healthcare person, my ability to be a businessman and own a business and run a business, my ability to be charitable and give back to the community, my ability to take care of my family and take care of myself to retirement, my ability to constantly improve myself. I mean, I'm not the same dentist today as I was even a month ago, and certainly not 15 years ago. And what's available to us in education and the money that we set aside every year to take additional education, not just for myself, but for my team members as well. I would say that's probably more important education than what I take. It is what you make of it. But, the biggest lesson I got, and I've told this story before, and I'll share it with your listeners. Please. Is the biggest lesson I got when I got out of dental school was my grandfather was disappointed in me. And by that, I mean, I graduated school. I mean, I graduated in the bottom third of my class. He didn't need to know that. But, he was disappointed because...
But can I share a quick joke, though? With you?
Go ahead, of course.
Do you know what they call the dentist that graduated last in his class?
Yeah, DDS.
Doctor.
Yeah, exactly.
Go ahead, continue.
So, he believed in lifelong education. He believed that you become the most specified, specialist, educated person in your profession. And that was the goal that he set. And I wanted to be a general dentist. I wanted to be a general dentist, a business person, and all those things. And, when I graduated dental school, my parents, said to me, listen, we can buy you a TV and all these things, but they're useless things. And we're not buying you a car or anything crazy like that. What they did was they gave me a gift of a dollar amount. It was about $10,000. And they said, this is yours. Here's the only rule. Since you were too dumb to get into the specialty school, they said, our only rule is you have to use this to take advanced education within the first year that you graduated dental school.
Wow.
And that education that I took in the first year, and I happened to take classes from Ross Nash and Bill Dickerson at LVI and David Hornbrook and Larry Rosenthal. And those are the kind of people that I took education from within 6 to 9 months of graduating school. And it really just fast tracked me onto many of the things that I got to do in my life and the passion that I have for dentistry. And dentistry is what you make of it. It's, I wouldn't choose another profession again. I would love for my kids to be dentists. I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do very much differently, to be honest with you.
Well, I think you can tell that Tarun and I are simply brothers from a different mother.
Yes.
We feel the same way. And every time we get together, it is just a wonderful, exhaustive time to share our passion for this wonderful profession. Tarun, we are going to have you come back.
Absolutely.
And I know our listeners would like to get in touch with you. If they'd like to reach out and send you an email, what would be a good way for them to reach out to you?
Yeah, so a couple of different ways. One is email. It's Dr. A at RaleighDentalArts.com. And probably the easiest way to get in touch with me and to keep in touch with me is through Facebook. If you just search me on Facebook, I'm constantly putting different things dental related on our Facebook page. And it's a great way. We all have smartphones in our pockets. I think they're sewn in to our pockets and soon they'll be slapped around our wrist.
Exactly.
With these watches.
I ordered mine today.
Yeah. Same here. So, that's really the best way to get in touch with me is through Facebook. Social media.
Tell you what I'll do for our listeners. If you're driving, don't take your hands off the wheel. I will put Tarun's contact information in the show notes. You can get the show notes at, some of you subscribe to this through iTunes or Stitcher Radio. If you'd like to get access to the show notes, go to my website, which is TACAS, TAKACS, learningcenter.com. Again, that's TACAS, TAKACS, learningcenter.com. I'll put Tarun's email address. I'll also put his link to his Facebook page on there so you can just connect with him in one click. And Tarun, just for, we'll talk more about this in our next interview, but I know you're doing some kind of cool things with some coursework, especially combining CEREC and CBCT. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. We have a training center on the second floor of our office. And the reason I like that is, one, I don't have to travel. But more importantly, beyond that, beyond the selfish reason, is it really allows people that come to the workshops. One, we do a live patient at every class, so we'll get to watch through the microscope what I'm doing. And two, when they come in and as they have questions, instead of me just talking about it, I say, you know what, let me just pull up the patient, because I have full access to my entire patient library. And I can say, you might ask me about an edentulous case, and I'll say, you know what, let me just pull up XYZ patient and let's take a look at it. And it also allows them to sit down with my team and walk through the office. And I try to stay away at that time because I want them to just work with my team and ask them the tough questions. Does he really do it this way? Or how do you do it? What's the key to success? Or what's the magic that's going on? And there's really no magic. It's just common sense to me. So I really like them to be able to do that. And Raleigh's a great place. I mean, it's a nice, easy flight from most places in the country. And we have a good time. I mean, it's always a lot of fun.
Hey, Tarun, I want to take a minute and say thanks. I treasure our friendship. Like I said, I feel like we're simply brothers from a different mother. And I want to thank you for all that you do for our profession. You're part of the new, really leading edge of dentistry, young dentists that are changing our profession. And I'm so excited that I can introduce you to our listeners. And I can't wait to publish this one. So, thanks. Thanks for all you do.
Oh, thank you very much. Thanks for having me on, and thank you for having a wonderful podcast. It's a great service, and I know it's a lot of work. So
yeah, it's a labor of love, though. I started this. I'll tell you the truth, and I've said this to others privately. I don't think I've ever said it publicly, but I would do this Thriving Dentist Show podcast just for the cool opportunity of talking to people like you.
Yeah, and it's a lot of fun. I mean, if nothing else, it keeps us all motivated.
Hey, it does.
Thanks so much for listening to T-Bone Speaks with Dr. Tarun Agarwal. Remember to keep striving for excellence, and we'll catch you on the next episode.